नाथं भक्तप्रियं सकललोकनमस्कृतं च त्रैगुण्यवर्जितमजं विभुमाद्यमीशं वन्दे भवघ्नममरासुरसिद्धवन्द्यं नारायणाय परिपूर्णगुणार्णवाय विश्वोदयस्थितिलयो नियतिप्रदाय ज्ञानप्रदाय विबुधासुरसौख्यदुःख सत्कारणाय वितताय नमो नमस्ते नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये देवं नारायणं नत्वा सर्वदोषविवर्जितं परिपूर्णं गुरुंश्च गीतार्थं वक्ष्यामि लेशतः लक्ष्मीनारायणं नत्वा पूर्णबोधान् गुरूनपि कुर्मः श्रीकृष्णगीतायाः भाष्यादुक्तार्थसङ्ग्रहम्. Good morning, everyone. Most of us know this is the weekly Pratipadartha that we do. Today we are beginning from chapter 12. This is a very interesting juncture. I was just speaking in Sachidanandji's room, the Sanatanan Arivom room, about this. It just feels nice to come to this close of completing two Shatkas, two Hiksats. So, Gita, we know that uh, we tend to study the Gita in parts of six chapters as one set. The first six chapters is one set. The next six chapters is the second set, and the third set is the last six chapters, chapter 13 to chapter 18. So this is the last phase of the second shatka, and befittingly, it's also called the Bhakti Yoga because Bhakti is another standard theme that people attribute not just to this chapter but to the entire shatka. The complete six chapters, right from chapter 7 till chapter 12, it's all Bhakti. Bhakti is the underlying theme. So we just completed the Vishwarupa Darshana, one very brilliant, amazing chapter where uh, the true transformation of Arjuna was seen, especially the second half where there are about 11 shlokas from Arjuna, which help us quickly recollect the entire message of the Bhagavad-Gita, the way Bhagavan was seen by Arjuna, and in that Vishwarupa, the way he explained, we could see the complete descriptions, the complete explanations provided by Bhagavan himself in all the 11 chapters, running up.
Bhartaji, you are not audible.
Is it audible now, Shraddhaji?
Yes, ji, now it's audible.
So it, I mean, we could nicely see through Arjuna's words the quick recollection of the entire Gita towards the end, towards the second part of the 11th chapter. And towards the last phase of the 11th chapter, we see what was happening. That Sudur Darshamidam Rupam. Krishna is giving the last discourse, right? Sudur Darshamidam Rupam. This is an extremely rare Rupa of mind. Whatever you saw is a very, very rare thing that people, are desperate to behold. Nityam Darshana Kankshanaha Devaha Api. Even the Deva Ganas are also desperately seeking to behold this form of the Bhagavan, and it's extremely rare, Arjuna. And the form that Arjuna could finally manage to behold, uh, the darshana that he got, na aham vedaihina tapasana danena na cha ijjayana. No, it's not through the yajnas, not through the danas, not through the extreme tapas, and not through the vedadhyayana. It's possible for anybody to get a view of this Vishwarupa Darshana. And he says it's only through Ananya Bhakti. Ananya is a very beautiful word. Uh, it's basically when we come to Narada Bhakti Sutra, I think there the definition of Ananya comes. Anya Ashraya Tyagat, like you give up every other possible way of taking a refuge. That's the Ananya Bhakti. Ananyaya Bhaktya Eva Aham Drashtum Jnatum Praveshtum Cha Tatvena Drashtum Tatvena Jnatum Tatvena Praveshtum Shakyaha. No, it's only through, I mean, again, the sight that Arjuna could behold, it's not just a physical sight, it's a tattvena. It's through the tattva he was able to see Bhagavan. And this is something that we need to remind ourselves. Go back to many other Pauranika amshas, like for example, that conversation between Hiranyakashipu and Prahlada. The Bhagavan was the same. He displayed himself, as a Narasimha avatar. Even before he could display himself as that Narasimha, Prahlada was able to see Bhagavan because he had already entered Tattvena Praveshtam. Prahlada had already entered. Prahlada had already known, Jnatum. And Prahlada was constantly seeing, Tattvena Drashtum. So there are many people who have been desperately trying to seek this, behold this entire Vishwarupa, and it's extremely rare. And there is also a point that Krishna makes, right? Other than you, nobody has seen. So basically, what Prahlada saw, what Prahlada knew about the Bhagavan is what Prahlada knew, is what Prahlada saw. What Arjuna saw is what Arjuna saw. What Vidura saw is what Vidura saw. Each one can see one amsha of the Bhagavan, right? So that's exactly what Krishna was finally debriefing towards the end of the 11th chapter. Bhaktya ananyaya bhaktya eva aham tattvena jnatum tattvena drashtum tattvena praveshtum shakyaha he parantapa. And then final shloka, it's like the big debrief of the entire Vishwarupa. Mat karma krit, mat paramaha, mat bhaktaha, sangha varjitaha. Give up all the sangha, having being varjita of all types of sangha. The kartrutva sangha, hetutva sangha, karma phala pekshe sangha, akarmani sangha. Give up all these. These are the four broad, sangha themes that we can see across the Gita. Whenever we hear about Sangha, Sangam, Tyaktva, all of this we hear from Krishna, he's basically referring to fourfold Sangha. Kartrutva Sangha, that Aham Bhava, I am the doer, that Sangha, Kartrutva Sangha, Tyaktva, Sangha Varjitaha. Then there is a, Hetutva, I do this for this reason. These people did so and so things to my son Abhimanyu, these people did so and so things to my wife Draupadi, and hence I fight the war. That Hetutva, give up that Hetutva. Right? No, you do your duty. You have to flow, you have to flow. You be part of the flow. Right? Hetutve Sangha. That's also part of the Ahankara. Right? And Karma Pala Pekshe Sangha. This is my result. This kingdom belongs to me. This end result is mine. There is again Mamakara. Right? So Karma Pala Pekshe Sangha, Tyaktva, Varjitaha. And then Akarmani, I will not do. Somebody is asking me to fight the war, I will not fight, I will not kill, I will not lift my gandiva. These are the kind of ahankara. So all of these sanghas are primarily rooted in ahankara. So give up all these sangha and do mat karma krit. All your krita, all your work is mat karma, my work. Basically, whatever creation I have initiated, you are part of it. You play your nimitta role as part of this entire creation. If we are all born as part of this prakritika creation, we are also part of the creation. We are also agents of the creation, right? As much as we are born in this creation, we have to do certain things which are adding to this creation, giving something to the progeny, right? Our children, our next generations who come after us are impacted by the things that we do. So we have a role to play. While we are products of this creation, we have an agency to fulfill, into this creation. So mat karma krit, he's telling him the same thing. Do my duty, do my work. Whatever we have to do is basically Bhagavad Karya we have to do. Mat Paramaha, consider me to be the supreme. No, there is nothing else other than Bhagavan that really matters. When we do the Bhagavad Karya, when every activity, including this clubhouse talk, right, there can be 100 different ways in which people can engage in a place like clubhouse. This Durlabha, Amogha kind of a satsanga, very few people engage in, because we believe that rather than spending our time in endless, never ending kind of a political ranting kind of a rooms, perhaps doing some chintana around these topics is a little more beneficial. This is we leave behind, right, for other people to follow. So all that we do is mat karma, bhagavat karma, considering him to be the supreme. There is nothing else that really matters other than Bhagavan. And mad bhakta, worship me, surrender yourself unto me, offer yourself completely unto me, mad bhakta. And then again sangha varjitha, giving up those fourfold sangha: kartrutva sangha, hetutva sangha, karmapala apeksha sanga, akarmani sanga, right? And nirvairaha. Sometimes what happens is when we consider ourselves to be parama bhaktas, parama bhagavat karya kartas, things like that, we tend to believe that, others are useless, and we tend to develop that. So we have to develop the compassion for a lot of people. And this is where the Bhagavad Bhava comes. And this is what I think perhaps the 12th chapter, elaborates a lot more. Like, that mudita bhava, maitra bhava, karunya bhava, upeksha bhava. Basically, when we have these four properly entailed, we will not have any vairi, bhava towards anyone. So nirvairaha, again, this is nothing new, right? This is basically a culmination of whatever we have learned so far. When we go back to the third chapter itself, there itself Krishna had told very, very different ways of developing these bhavas. Like, once he said, na buddhi bedam janayed ajnanam karma sanginam, don't do discrimination of people who are doing things for their own selfish needs. Joshayet sarva karmani, you inspire them, you join hands with them, you inspire in their work, being the vidvan yukta, by bringing in your intelligence, like there is no point. The minute Arjuna gets this Gita Upadesha from Krishna, imagine he going to Drishtadyumna. Hey Drishtadyumna, oh Bhava, oh brother-in-law, what you are doing is absolutely rubbish. Don't come here with your vairi bhava. This revenge kind of a feeling that you have towards Dronacharya is absolutely useless. Do the Bhagavat Karya. He can't do that virtue signaling, right? Drishtadyumna might be in this war because of fulfilling his own personal desires. The Panchala Desha has half the kingdom sitting in the Kaurava side, right? So he still needs to deliver that. So nirvairaha, don't bring in that vairi swabhava. Like, you don't have to really hate the Kauravas, the way you are calling them as, Atatayinaha. You don't have to really hate them. Do your duty. This is all, this Dharma Yuddha is called Dharma Yuddha because this is Bhagavad Karya. Like, this is your own Dronacharya, this is your own Bhishmacharya, this is your own, Kauravas. That's why, repeatedly we hear Krishna calling Arjuna as Kuru Nandana, Kuru Pravira. Like, we hear that, those kind of sambodhana towards. So you don't have to have any vairi, but play the Bhagavad Karya, right? Nirvairaha sarva bhuteshu, across all living beings, you don't have any personal agenda, right? Neither na hrishyati na dveshti, that kind of a, na prahrishyet priyam prapya, na udvijet apriyam prapya, those kind of things that keep ringing. Sarva bhuteshu nirvairaha bhutva yah samameti pandava, the one who follows these kind of principles, he will acquire me, he will enter me, he will obtain me. Mam eti, like he comes into me. Pandava, oh Pandava, Pandava. It's a very beautiful sambodhana. Pandava signifies the buddhi amsha, right? Now, and we know for the fact that at this juncture, Arjuna is a really, really, really transformed person than what he was perhaps a couple of chapters ago, right? There is a lot more transformation that we could see. Otherwise, it's not easy for somebody to come up with what Arjuna, kind of narrated, the kirtana about the Bhagavan, stane hrishikesha tava prakirtya jagat prahrishya tanurajyate cha. So those 11 shlokas are perhaps a very beautiful testimony to the kind of transformation, the parivartana that Arjuna has gone through. So Pandava is a very beautiful sambodhana that, be buddhi yukta. Of course, Pandava means Pandu Putra, but Pandu is rooted in the word called Panda. Panda is buddhi. Like, we have Pande, Panda in Gujarat. I mean, when we go to Puri and all, the pujaris are called Pandita. All these words are rooted in the same root called Panda. Right? Of course, it is Pandu Putra. I mean, we shouldn't confuse ourselves. So, in the Laukika sense, it is definitely the Pandu Putra. But Pandava, the beautiful beauty of the word is also the fact that it brings us the reminder of Panda, Buddhiman. And this is where we are entering chapter number 12. Chapter number 12, the first verse, it reads like this. Arjuna Uvacha, Harihi Om. Evam satata yuktaye bhaktas paryupasate. Ye cha pyaksharam avyaktam tesham ke yoga vittamaha. Now, click on the link given under the room title by Shraddhaji has given the link. This is a beautiful website. It can definitely act like a starting point for us to understand, as a subject, right? So click on this. It's a beautiful link developed for the Aurobindo Institute. It's a good library of works called the VMLT, Vande Mataram Library Trust, spearheaded by Dr. Sampadananda. So this is a useful website that we refer to. Look at this. Arjuna Uvacha, Evam Satata Yuktaye Bhaktas Tvam Paryupasate Ye Chapyaksharam Avyaktam Tesham Ke Yoga Vittamaha. So this is the shloka. When we scroll down a little bit on this website, come down a little bit, you see a section called Padacheda. Padacheda is where basically the website breaks the shloka into the individual words. Arjuna Uvacha becomes Arjuna Uvacha. Right? Notice that aha Arjuna, that aha, the visarga, two dots, they go missing in the shloka. That's basically a sandhi formation, right? A sandhi is where basically there are predominantly three types of changes that occur when two words come in contact with each other. When the compounding happens, there are three types of changes that occur. One is called lopa, something disappears. Agama, some new sound comes in. So an existing sound disappears, that's a sandhi, and a new sound comes. That could be another possibility. That's called the Agama Sandhi. Predominantly, we see the third type, which is called the Adesha. An existing sound gets modified. So here we see the Lopa. Arjuna Uvacha becomes Arjuna Uvacha. It's called the Visarga Lopa Sandhi. Evam Satata Yuktaha Ye. Yuktaha Ye becomes Yukta Ye. Again we see the Visarga Lopa. Bhaktaha Tvam. Bhaktas Tvam. So Visarga now is becoming Adesha. Visarga, the aha, Bhaktaha, is becoming S, Sakara. Visarga Sattva Sandhi. Bhaktaha Tvam. Bhaktas Tvam. Paryupasate. Ye cha api. Ye cha api. Cha api becomes cha api. So a becomes a. That's another adesha. Savarna dirgha we call it, right? Cha 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 a cha. So ye cha api. Ye cha api. Api aksharam apyaksharam. So there is another slight modification. So adesha. Api aksharam apyaksharam. It's called the yanasandhi. Apyaksharam. Apyaksharam avyaktam tesham ke yoga vittamaha. Right? uh, yoga with, so this is the breakdown. These are the different words in the shloka. Now what they also do, a section just above the padacheda, we have a section called anvaya. In anvaya, what we see is basically all these words are put together in a proper prose order, right? How these words could sound in a proper spoken sentence. So here we see Arjuna uvacha, hey Krishna. So he's addressing Krishna. Hey Krishna, ये भक्ताः एवं सततयुक्ताः त्वां पर्युपासते ये च अक्षरम् अव्यक्तं पर्युपासते तेषां के योगवित्तमाः. So he's asking a question. So now we have come to the stage where we are hearing a question from Arjuna. This is perhaps the 13th question coming from Arjuna. We will see the counting later, but I think 12th or 13th question. There are series of questions, right, throughout Bhagavad-Gita. So this is perhaps the 12th or 13th round of questioning. So he's asking the question, Hey Krishna, ye bhaktaha evam satata yuktaha tvam paryupasate, ye cha aksharam avyaktam api paryupasate, tesham ke yoga vittamaha. What does that mean? For that we click on something called dictionary on the top. You scroll up a little bit. uh, there are 3 4 tabs: shloka, dictionary, analysis, references, highlight, right? So there is a lot of scholarly work this website has put together. I mean, you can look at multiple other sections in your free time, but let's quickly see dictionary, right? That's where we can understand the meaning. Hey Krishna, ye bhaktaah evam satata yuktaah. Oh Krishna, those bhaktas who are thus being in satata yukti, like in nirantara yukti, in constant engagement in your service, in your devotion. What kind of a this kind of a devotion is Arjuna referring to? We have to go back to the previous shloka, which is the last shloka of the 11th chapter. Mat karma krit, mat paramaha, mat bhaktaha, sangha varjitaha. With those kind of feelings, when bhaktas who are satata yukta, who are constantly engaged, who are in constant union with the Bhagavad Bhava, who are constantly in union with the Bhagavad Karya, evam satata yukta, जो इस तरीके की सतत युक्ति स्थिति में तुम्हारे भक्त लोग त्वाम पर्युपासते, तुम्हें तुम्हारी upasana karte hain, they worship you, seek after you. Upasana can be seeking, upasana can be praising, upasana can be worshipping. See, pari means towards, upa means sub, asa is sit together, right? Asana, asate. So pari upa asa, pari upasate. Pari is towards, upa is kind of sub, and asa. So pari upasate, then it can be, doing vrata for you, doing bhakti towards you, doing pujan for you, who are seeking you. We have to develop the feeling towards that word, right? So then we can get the meaning. What exactly is that? So tvam evam paryupasate satata yuktaha bhaktaha ye cha aksharam paryupasate. And also those people who do the upasana, paryupasana of the akshara, avyakta akshara. Okay, avyakta is unmanifest. Avyakta, na vyakta. Vyakti is the manifested people, right? So avyakta, unmanifest. Akshara is the immutable, na kshara. There is no destruction of it, right? That's the infinite tattva of the Bhagavad. So those people, so basically let's rephrase this, right? So hey Krishna, those bhaktas who do in this satata yukti sthiti, who do your paryupasana in this state. What is this in this state? Whatever we saw in the 11th chapter. 11th chapter and the 10th chapter, because these are the Vishwarupa, right? He showed himself, Vayur Yamognir Yavaruna Shashankah Prajapatistvam Prapitamahascha. So in all the manifested Daivamsha, Bhutarashi, Uragaha, Rakshasas, in everything Arjuna was seeing the Bhagavan, right? In the Vishwarupa, it's all the Vyakta Swarupas, all the Vyakta forms. So he could see in everything, every force of this creation, every being in this creation, every object of this creation, every experience of this creation, Arjuna was able to see the Bhagavan. So these are all the Vyakta Swarupas. And all these Vyakta Swarupas also have a Kshara. They have a shelf life, right? So now Arjuna is asking, oh Krishna, people who do your Upasana in this Vyakta Swarupa, the sum total of all of which is you, the big Bhagavan, right? People who do Upasana of you through this Murti Swarupa, Vyakta Swarupa, or those people who do your upasana in the avyakta akshara swarupa, who directly think you are that nirguna nirakar, who are the akshara avyakta form. Okay, tesham ke yoga vittamaha, who is the supreme most yogi among them? So yoga vit, who understands a yoga vittaraha, who is like superlative, comparative, yoga vit, yoga vittaraha, yoga vittamaha. So these are the good, better, best. We say that there are positive, comparative, and superlative. So this is the superlative, yoga vittamaha, and that's the bahuvachana, yoga vittamaha. Like, who is the most supreme, knowledgeable yogi? Yoga vit is the knowledge, right? Who is the most supreme knowledgeable yogi, right? Now, we have, so there are two, three ways in which this can be understood, right? When we say avyakta akshara, again, when we look into the bhashyas, I think there are different versions of this. It will come, right? Like for example, when we look into some sets of the bhashyas, there are people who look at this as is Bhagavan the Nirguna Nirakar or the Saguna Sakar, right? Or this is the most famous one. Is the Karma Bhakta Marg better or the Jnana Marg better? Right? We don't know, right? And we saw the instances where he was constantly toggling between describing himself as that Nirguna Nirakar and the Saguna Sakar, like Pashyame Partha Rupani Shatashota Sahasraha. When he spoke about that, Chara Chara, Chara Achara, the entire Jagat is Chara, in that he is Achara. There is a lot of Saguna Sakara forms inside the Bhagavan, and he is Nirguna Nirakar. Anoraniyam Sam, he is the Sukshma than the subtler than the subtlest. He is the tinier than the tiniest. That's the way we can see, right? So in calculus also we tend to see there are two types of expression. N tends to infinity, n tends to zero, but n never is zero, n never is infinity, right? When addressing such differential calculus situations, you know uh, calling n as tending to infinity is one, n becoming infinity is another. We never say n equals infinity. We always say n tends to infinity. And Bhagavan is also described the same way, right? Mahato mahiyam. And n tends to zero. N never becomes zero. There is nothing called nothing, right? There is always something. No, at no point in time will there be no time. Because there is always some time, right? There is always something. So n never becomes zero, but n tends to zero. So easy. So, but then people tend to say that there is a two ends of the spectrum. On one side there is shunyata, absolutely anoho aniyam, n tends to zero, and mahato mahiyam. The other end of the spectrum is that the infinity, sum total of all of this and beyond, the way we call it, right? Padaha asya vishwa bhutani, tripadasyaamritam divi, like, Sabhumim Vishwato Rutta Atyatishtad Shangulam. When we see the Purusha Sukta also, we tend to hear that he is all of this plus beyond, something like that. So on the other end of the spectrum, we see the Mahato Mahiyam kind of a state. So one way of looking at the comparison between what Arjuna is asking is, are you Nirguna Nirakar or are you Saguna Sakar? People who do your upasana in either of the forms, who is the most supreme yogi? That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it, when we look at uh, some of the Vedic lines and things like that, right? Avyakta can be seen as Devi, Prakriti. There is something called the Prakriti Purusha, and that's also plausible because the very next chapter is all about Prakriti Purusha, right? The question further leads us into, are you Prakriti, are you Purusha? When we look at uh, some of the lines, Avyakta Prakriti Rahu. We hear some of these lines. Prakriti is called as Avyakta, and she is also the Kutastham Aksharam. Chatatam. They say something like, she is the Kutastha, she is the Akshara, she is the Avyakta. There are lines in the Vedic version, and there are also Upasana, right? Especially when we look into some of these suktas. I mean, there are in the Rig Veda there are many many suktas that are praising the Devi. Like there is something called the Amrani Sukta, where Devi is proudly proclaiming that Aham Rudre Peru Vasabhischaram Yaham Aditya Iruta Vishwadevai. There are She is the one who is praised by Rudra, Brahma, Vasus, Aditya, Vishwadevas, everyone, and they are the ones who are the yogis, right? Parama yogis are those different devaganas. And on the other side, now you told me that you become Mad Bhakta, Mad Paramaha, Mad Karma Krit. I was under the impression that all of this upasana is basically Devi upasana, because see, Bhagavad-Gita started from the 25th adhyaya of the Bhishma Parva. Two adhyayas prior to Bhagavad-Gita, within the same Bhishma Parva, there is a Durga Stuti that Arjuna does. And Krishna is the one. At that point in time, I think that's the chapter where Bhagavan Uvacha comes. Until then, all the talks of Bhagavan was attributed as Vasudeva Uvacha. When you look at Mahabharata, if you don't study Gita, if you study Mahabharata in general, all the while he is called as Vasudeva Uvacha. Whenever Krishna has to speak something, we call it as Vasudeva Uvacha. It's only when the Bhagavad Gita is about to kickstart is where we hear Bhagavan Vacha, or very few terms, very few instances where we hear there is a special articulation that happens. Like, that is when he will be called as Bhagavan Vacha. That's some beauty. I think that's another point of study. When we want to study Mahabharata, we can do that. But at that point in time is where he is actually called as Bhagavan Vacha. Chapter 23, within this Bhagavad-Gita Upaparva, which is part of the Bhishma Parva, is where he will be called as Bhagavan Vacha. And he is the one who's telling Arjuna, you go down to Durga. He is the one who will give you the victory, like, Jaya. And Jaya need not be just the victory in the Kurukshetra. It's much beyond this, right? So it could be the upasana between the Prakriti Purusha. Are you now telling me to do the upasana of Prakriti, which is where I started from? Like, you asked me to go down to Durga. Now you're asking me to do your upasana. Which of the two is more supreme? You please tell me. That could be the way. So one option is Nirguna Nirakar or Saguna Sakar. But let us see within these 18 chapters. or within these six chapters, right? The last six chapters that we have seen, from chapter 7 onward, there are, this is the shatka, right? Within this shatka, there are a couple of instances where the same thing has been brought out by Krishna. At one point in time, in the seventh chapter, he says, avyaktam vyaktimapannam manyante mama buddhayaha. There is a beautiful line. So, I mean, and that is where the bhakti bhava was starting to be sown. Like, he started seeding the bhakti bhava from that point onward. Avyaktam, I'm basically avyakta, but people think I am also one ordinary vyakta. Avyaktam vyaktimapannam manyante mam abuddhayaha. People without any buddhi, without people with the manda buddhi, they think I am also that vyakta swarupa who's fundamentally avyakta. Okay. Param bhava janantaha. They don't understand my parama bhava, which perhaps gives us a hint, gives us some kind of a hint that the supreme, the completeness of the Bhagavan is much beyond the Vyakta Swarupa, which is true, right? When we look into the Purusha Sukta and all, Padaha Asya Vishwa Bhutani. When we look into the Vishnu Sahasranama also, right? Uh, Sahasra Shirsha Purushaha Sahasrakshaha Sahasrapat. He has the 1,000 legs. He's not four legs. He's got 1,000 legs. Similarly, when we start the 1,000 name upasana of the Bhagavan, Vishwam Vishnu, the first pada is Vishnu. Right? The first pada of the 1,000 pada is Vishwa, Vishwam Vishnu. And the remaining 999 is the remaining glories of the Bhagavan. So, Param Bhavam Ajanantaha, if you just count that, whatever you see as the manifested Rupa of mine is everything of me, then that is Abuddhi. Param Bhavam Ajanantaha, Mama Vyayam Anuttamam, Mama Avyayam Anuttamam, he says. So, from the seventh chapter, he starts, describing these things, right? And then in the eighth chapter, he describes both Akshara. See, eighth chapter, I think contextually we need to stay true to the context of the eighth chapter. The eighth chapter, basically, it has eightfold questions. One of the questions is, prayana kale cha katham jneyah asi. How should we think of you? How are you to be thought about? And how is it possible to think about you during the time of prayana kala? And while the question is prayana kala, the answer is you can't just think of me during prayana kala. Even if you think of me during prayana kala properly, you will have some benefits. But practice the upasana constantly. When we constantly develop the habit of looking at Bhagavan, appreciating the Bhagavad Rupa in everything, that is the best way. You can't miss me during prayana kala, right? So when he is explaining that, at one point in time, he explains that Brahma, right? He explains the Parabrahma. Yadaksharam Veda Vido Vadanti, Vishanti Yadyatayo Vitaragaha, Yadichanto Brahmacharyam Charanti, Tatte Padam Sangrahena Pravakshi. With the Akshara, desiring which there are different types of karma yogis, bhakti yogis and the jnana yogis do my upasana to enter me. That's basically, I think, shloka number 9, 10, something of the 8th chapter. Yat aksharam Veda Vidaha Vadanti. That akshara which Veda Vidas, people who understand the Veda, who speak of, vishanti yadyataha, pravishanti, Vita Raga Yoginaha, the yogis who are completely in control, that akshara which they enter, pravishanti, yadichanto brahmacharyam charanti, and desiring to obtain which there are people who follow the brahmacharya. Tatte padam sangrahena pravakshi. Right? That, I will explain to you more about that Akshara Brahma. That's the chapter, right? The chapter is called the Akshara Brahma. And from that point onward, we hear more and more and more. And at one point, he starts explaining, like, avyakta vyaktaya sarvaha. All that you see as vyakta, all that you see as the manifestation in this entire universe is basically coming from that avyakta. Avyakta vyaktaya sarvaha, which I think is sloka number 18. Yeah, it's 18 sloka number 18 of the eighth chapter. That's where he starts explaining avyakta. And this is being explained, and we need to go back to the context, right? This is being explained to help Arjuna get better sense of how to do the Bhagavad Upasana. Please understand, right? He's explaining Arjuna, he's detailing out the Brahma, Akshara Brahma, so that Arjuna can understand how to do the Bhagavad Upasana. and that brahma bhuvana lokaha, sahasra yuga pariyantam aharyat brahmano. He explains the magnanimity of the Brahma after one at one point explaining anoho aniyamsam. I think shloka number 8 or 9. Kavim puranam anushasitaram anoho aniyamsam. He is subtler than the subtlest. And then he goes on to explain the big part of the Brahma, how mighty that Mahat Brahma is, like Param Brahma is. And he explains that all that you see as manifest is basically come from that avyakta. Avyakta vyaktaya sarvaha. And couple of shlokas down the line, he explains Paraha tasmat tu bhavaha anyaha. Parastasmat bhavonyaha. There is something bigger than this Brahma. Avyaktaha avyakta sanatanaha. There is something bigger avyakta than this avyakta. So avyakta is not just one. If we think that Prakriti is avyakta, of course she is avyakta. But there is a Parabrahma who is also bigger avyakta than this avyakta, right? That can be seen. If the Nirguna Nirakar is what you see as Brahma, Brihat, there is somebody bigger than that, that's me, right? He explains that Parahatasmatu bhavaha anyaha avyaktaha avyaktat sanatanaha. There is some bigger avyakta than the other avyakta. So, and this is where I think when we study the Vedas and all properly, one thing that comes out very clear is nobody can really get the grasp of who this Parabrahma is. Other than the Chaturmukha Brahma, nobody even has the authority, nobody even is entitled, nobody even has the capacity, the yogyata to understand this Parabrahma completely. All of us who can do some upasana, we can do that kinchit upasana. Like how what Prahlada saw of the Bhagavan is what Prahlada saw of the Bhagavan. What Arjuna saw of the Bhagavan is what Arjuna saw of the Bhagavan. And that's what even Krishna was telling Arjuna, right? What you saw was never seen by anybody before. Very clearly appreciating the fact that Hanumanta has seen in the Treta Yuga. Like, within the same Dwapara Yuga, within this own Krishna Avatara, Yashoda Maya has seen Krishna, Vidura has seen Krishna, but each one, whoever saw whatever they saw is what they saw. Like it's up to us. So the true big picture nobody can really understand. That's what he was explaining in the 8th chapter, that avyakta akshara brahma. And the culmination of that explanation of the 8th chapter came in the 9th chapter, because it's one single continuous discourse coming from Bhagavan. There is no middle interruption, there is no other question from Arjuna. When we see something called the Raja Yoga, no it is not a separate question. It is an extension of the same discourse. Whatever he gave about the Akshara Brahma, he concludes in that, Man mana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. In that Avyakta Upasana, you have to become a Bhakta. Man mana bhava, in that, become completely immersed in that Avyakta Swabhava. Man mana bhava, madbhakta bhava, madhyaji, and you do all your yaga towards that Avyakta Akshara Brahma Swarupa, right? And from the 10th chapter, we see that the question from Arjuna was, he was not happy in that broad brush painting of the Avyakta Akshara Parabrahma. He wanted to know Keshu Keshu ja Bhaveshu. Bhava is what is being there. Yat bhavam tad bhavati, right? Bhava comes only in the manifest form. Bhava is manifest. So the 10th chapter is where we are taken into the bhava. Keshu keshu ja bhaveshu chintyahasi. In what all different bhavanas, forms that you need to be thought about. Where should I see you? And that led us into the Vishwarupa Darshana. And the Vishwarupa Darshana culminated from Bhagavan saying, Mat karma krit mat paramaha. They both sound the same, right? If you look at the last shloka of the 11th chapter and the last shloka of the 9th chapter, they sound very much similar. Only differences in the 11th chapter, he is talking about that Vishwarupa that Arjuna saw. In the 9th chapter, he is the Akshara Brahma that Arjuna was explained about. Now, Arjuna's question is, who among them is better? The one who offers completely unto you, thinking about your avyakta akshara rupa, or the one who constantly worships you, delivers all their tasks as a dedication to you, like in your Vishwarupa, in this completely manifest form, who among them is the most supreme knowledgeable yogi, yoga vittamaha. I don't know. I hope I couldn't confuse. I didn't confuse. But let's quickly see what Aurobindo says for this shloka. Right? So there are multiple different ways in which this question of Arjuna can be interpreted. Is it the Prakriti or is it the Purusha that we need to do the Upasana? Who is better among the ones who do the Upasana? Is it the Nirguna Nirakara or the Saguna Sakara? Who among them is better? Or is it the Akshara Brahma, the 8th and 9th chapter, the theme of the 8th and the 9th chapter, or this Vishwarupa, which is the theme of the 10th and the 11th chapter? Which of the two bhaktas are the Yoga Vittamaha, who are the supreme most knowledgeable yogis? I think that's the way we can perhaps briefly summarize this, right, with the long explanation of it. Let's quickly see the Aurobindo interpretation. We come back to the main screen of this web page. We hear this Aurobindo interpretation. Arjuna said, those devotees, O Krishna, who thus by a constant union seek after you, and those who seek after the unmanifest, immutable, avyakta akshara. Which of these yogis have a greater knowledge of yoga or the greatest? Yoga Vittamaha is the supreme most, greatest knowledge of yoga. Of course, better among the two, but he is the supreme most yogi. Right? That's how this shloka can be understood. But again, the translation is one starting point. We have to do the slow dharana, upadharana. We have to internalize these thoughts, and that's where I was making an attempt at giving that explanation. Circling back with what we had heard in the Bhagavad-Gita. Again, this is a limited attempt. If anybody has any interjections, any further point to add, please do come up on stage. And those people in the stage, Shraddhaji, Sudhaji, Rameshji, also please feel free to join in if there is any further pointers around this. So with that, we move on to the next shloka. On top of this web page, on the top right part of this web page, there is something called the next. When we click on next, we go to the next. Okay. Now we hear Bhagavan Uvacha. Harihi Om. Bhagavan Uvacha. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. मय्यावेश्य मनो ये मां नित्ययुक्ता उपासते श्रद्धया परयोपेताः ते मे युक्ततमा मताः मय्यावेश्य मनो ये मां नित्ययुक्ता उपासते श्रद्धया परयोपेताः ते मे युक्ततमा मताः. You scroll down and see the padacheda. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, no sandhi is there. Mai aveshya, Mai aveshya, there is a sandhi. Mai aveshya, Manaha, Ye, Mano Ye, there is a sandhi. Manaha Ye, Mam, Nitya Yuktaha Upasate, Shraddhaya Paraya Upetaha, Te me Yuktatamaha Mataha. Shraddhaya Paraya Upetaha, Parayopetaha, there is another sandhi. Te me Yuktatamaha Mataha, Yuktatama Mataha, there is another sandhi. Lopa. Right? We'll see the Anvaya quickly. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. Mai Manaha Aveshya Nityayuktaha Paraya Shraddhaya Upetaha Ye Mam Upasate Te Yuktatamaha Iti Me Mataha or Me Mataha. Right? What does that mean? We click on dictionary. He's telling Arjuna, right? Hey Arjuna, Mai Manaha Aveshya, having got the complete focus of their mind in me, having their mind completely focused in me, मुझ पर मन को आवेश करके aveshya. No, aveshya is where we bring in the focus, right? We bring in the aveshya is also getting the amsha, dharana, right? Nitya yuktaha paraya shraddhaya upetaha. Nitya yukti log और पर, no paraya shraddhaya, like पारमार्थिक श्रद्धा से जो उपेता जो युक्त है, like people who are endowed with parashraddha and nitya yukta, ye mam upasate, those people who do my upasana, those people who do my upasana with paraya shraddha and nitya yukta and my manaha avesha, completely their mind focused on to me with constant engagement. Nitya is now, constantly now, eternally now. Nitya yukta, constantly, no flinching at all. And paraya shraddhaya upetaha. Te yuktatamaha iti me mataha. Those are the supreme yogis. Yuktataha, yuktataraha, yuktatamaha. Yukta. So the positive comparative superlative, right? So yuktatamaha, the supremost yogi. Right? Te yuktatamaha iti me mataha. Those are the supreme yogis, is my belief. What is he saying? Those people who completely focus their mind onto me, they obtain the Bhagavad Bhava, and with constant yukti, constant engagement towards me, and in supreme shraddha, who do my upasana, those are the most supreme yogis. See, he's not answering Arjuna directly. He's not telling whether they are Nirguna Nirakara or Saguna Sakara. Are they worshipping the Avyakta Akshara, or are they worshipping the Vaibhava Vishwarupa, no, Bhagavan? No, are they worshipping the Prakriti or the Purusha? He's not even answering that. He is basically, the answer that he's giving is very similar to what we heard in the last shloka of the sixth chapter. Yoginam api sarvesham madgatena antaratmana shraddhavan bhajate yo mam same yukta tamo mataha. Among all the yogis, yoginam api sarvesham madgatena, who constantly approach me, madgatena antaratmana, with their complete mind, atma focused into me through their mind. Shraddhavan, people with that shraddha, bhajate yo mam, who offer themselves completely unto me. Same yuktatamaha. For I consider them to be yuktatamaha, yoga vittamaha, the supreme yogi. Very similar, right? The words are a little different. The word positions are also a little different, but the message is very, very same. Only difference is paraya shraddhaya. From shraddha, he is now bringing the focus to paraya shraddhaya, supreme shraddha. Perhaps the reason being that it's a shraddha that is lacking in this question from Arjuna. What is Shraddha? Shraddha basically means sumanatva, shuddhamatitva, anindakatva, ananyagatitva. This is a beautiful definition for the word Shraddha. When we look at Amara Kosha, Vachaspati, there is no Samanartaka pada for Shraddha. Shraddha is Shraddha. In English, then we need to do some jugglery, the word jugglery, right? We need to look at words like trust, faith, oneness, some different words, and even those things will not give us the proper meaning. But this definition, holds much, in depth. Sumanatva, with clean mind, no kalmasha, no asuya, clean sumanatva. Shuddha matitva, clean intellect. It's not blind. Many people are going in that artaha, jijnasuhu, artharthi, right? Not that kind of a shraddha. No, not going behind Bhagavad for a vested interest, for an ulterior motive. No. Shuddha matitva. You know for exactly what he is there. See, Bhagavan at one point he says that no, nadatte kasyachit papam nachaiva sukritam vibhuhu. He will not do any magic of cleansing your papa just like with a magic wand, right? He will not even snatch away your sukrita. You have to do your sukrita. You have to overcome your papa. No, nadat, nacha, nakartrutvam, na karmani, na karmapala sanyogam, prabhu sujate. Bhagavan doesn't give anybody any specific task. He has given you the choices in front of you. Your swabhava is there. He will help you with the jnana if you offer unto him. So all of these are already told in the earlier chapter. The importance of jnana, importance of bhakti, importance of sannyasa. Sannyasa itself is Vishnu, right? In sannyasa itself is Bhagavan, Brahma. Nyasa, Brahma. Nyasa itself is Brahma. That's what we hear in the Taittiriya, right? So all of this is already told enough number of times in the earlier chapters. Now he's only reminding him, Paraya Shraddhaya, with supreme sense of Sumanatva, Shuddha Matitva. Your intellect is clean. You're no more deluded to believing that there is some ulterior motive that you can achieve by claiming to be my bhakta. If you are truly my bhakta, you won't even ask these questions. Right? You won't have this is better or that is better. Shuddha Matitva, you just offer everything unto me. Like here also, right? When we come to clubhouse also, many rooms of discussions are, is jnana yoga better or karma yoga better or bhakti yoga better? Offer yourself, boss. Jnana leads into bhakti, bhakti leads into. See, there is no jnana without bhakti, and the bhakti will not remain without jnana. No, any bhakti that is not seated in the jnana is only temporary, right? It is very, very superficial. It doesn't remain strong. So jnana, bhakti, karma, they are strongly entwined in each other. And karma is, we can't escape that, because karma is basically Bhagavad Karya, our dharma. No, dharmasya pravarachitah, right? So about what we do, our dharma, our karma is basically Bhagavad Karya. So when we have that kind of an endowment, that Shuddha Matitva, proper intellect, no more bewildered state that I do this for that. If I do this, Bhagavan will grant me this. Nothing he will grant us other than the jnana. We have to do our karya, we have to overcome the papa. Right? It's only the jnana that he will help us with. For that, we have to be thankful to Bhagavan. So, Shuddha Matitva, Sumanatva, clean mind, no asuya, no kalmasha. Shuddha Matitva, clean intellect. Right? Anindakatva, there is no more nindana, either of the Bhagavan, either of one form of the Bhagavan, whether somebody is calling him as Shunya, which is closer to the Nirguna Nirakara, or somebody is calling him as Saguna Sakara, Brihatvat Brahma, we call, right? The complete big picture. There is no Nindakatva. This is better, that is better. No Nindaka. It's all Bhagavan. It's the same thing. Between the two ends of the continuum, it's the same Bhagavan that we see, right? Anindakatva. And we don't really have to, just because somebody is doing Ganapati Upasana, do some Nindana. Then somebody is doing Surya Upasana, do some Nindana. No more Nindana. Everyone is doing their Yogyata Anusara, Upasana. At the end of the day, Krishna has very proudly, without any sense of insecurity, has proclaimed, Mama Vartma Anuvartante Manushya Partha Sarvashaha. At the end of the day, whatever Upasana he does, Akashat Patitam Toyam Sagaram Pratigachati. Whichever, Upasana that we do, whichever Bhagavad Upasana that we do, it's the Bhagavan that is receiving it all. Aham hi sarva yajnana bhokta cha prabhurevacha. At the end of the day, for every yajna, he is the bhokta, he is the prabhu, right? So it doesn't really matter to him, right? So anindakatva, you don't have to really put down somebody. Tana krishna vido mandan krishna vinna vichalayet. Don't put down the people, don't upset the people just because you think they are incompletely knowledgeable. Just because you think you are completely knowledgeable, don't do that virtue signaling, don't insult anyone, don't do that. Anindakatva, ananya gatitva, proper belief, that ananya bhakti, right? Ananya gatitva, there is no other path other than this path of Bhagavan. That's the shraddha. Now he is not just expecting shraddha from Bhagavan, he is expecting the paraya shraddhaya upetaha, because shraddha was already told in the 6th chapter. The end of the 6th chapter gave the same answer. The answer to what Arjuna is asking right now at the beginning of the 12th chapter, the answer was given at the end of the first shatka. He doesn't need to come to the end of the second shatka to seek that answer. Only thing that Arjuna is drawing, Krishna is drawing the line, is to remind him what you need is parashraddha, boss. That is what is lacking, which is basically sumanatva is lacking, shuddha matitva is lacking, anindakatva is lacking, and ananya gatitva is lacking. Come back. Paraya shraddhaya upetaha te me yuktatama mataha. Those are the supreme yogis, is my belief, right? So Arjuna, the question itself is very clear that the shraddha is perhaps lacking, and Arjuna is all of us, right? I keep quoting this example, like I've seen this in temples. There is one auntie who would come very close to my place earlier when I was living in Bangalore, in a Ganesha temple. One auntie would come, calls Bhagavan with all possible explanation. Oh, Jagadeka Karana, Jagadodhara, all of that, Sarvajna, Sarvavyapi, all of this being called for the Bhagavan, and then finally, disclaimer that, listen to my problem, as if he doesn't know, right? Listen to my problems. And goes on, oh, my daughter has these issues, please do these things for her. No, my son has these issues, do these things for her, for him. No, my daughter-in-law so she has the list, like, from her daughter-in-law to her son to her daughter to her grandchildren to her husband, everyone, she has a huge list. And this is basically, right, we have this element of doubt. And Arjuna, if he's having a doubt, it's basically after telling couple of times, Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mame vaishasa yuktvevam atmanam matparayanaha. Similarly, towards the end of the 11th chapter, mat karma krid mat paramo madbhakta sangavarjitaha nirvaira sarva bhuteshu. Then Arjuna is having this question: who among the two upasakas are the best? Right? So Krishna's answer is very simply put the reminder of what he said in the end of the 6th chapter. The only difference is come back to Parashraddha Arjuna. That's what is missing, right? That is where we are. Let's quickly see what Aurobindo interpretation says for this shloka. The blessed Lord Bhagavan said, Uvacha, those who found their mind in me, no, Maya Veshamanaha, and by constant union, Nitya Yuktaha, possessed of the supreme faith, Shraddhaya Paraya Upetaha. And again, faith is very watering down the actual meaning of the word Shraddha, right? Shraddha is much more than just the faith. Seek after me, Mam Paryupasate. I hold them to be the most perfectly in union with yoga, in union of yoga, or Te me yuktatamaha mataha. Right? But again, the translations tend to oversimplify sometimes, especially English. The depth is contained only in Sanskrita. The more and more we do the upasana of these shlokas, the constantly we remind ourselves of this line, the deeper meaning will automatically come. But suddenly, when we see any other translation, be it in Kannada, I mean, any local language is always better, be it Kannada, be it Hindi. The same website, when we see the Hindi interpretation, it tends to carry a little more depth than English. But the real depth is always contained in only the Samskrita, the real shloka. So, with that explanation, my only thing is that, please come up on stage and share your views, because at the end of the day we want to do constant upasana, because we don't stop here, right? We have the daily Bhagavad-Gita chanting that we chant all these shlokas once every week. We complete the full parayana of the Bhagavad-Gita every week, and the whole purpose of that is to kind of help us you know, remind ourselves of these lines, and then do the deeper upasana, because that is where we can do the avesha. The constant avesha of the Bhagavad Swabhava can only happen when we constantly remind ourselves of these lines and try to get better and better, inch by inch, little by little. We get closer to the Bhagavad Upasana. So that's the whole intent. So if anybody has further points to add, this is the satsanga, right? Please to come up on stage. We would love to have you here. But with that, I will move on to the next shloka. In the meanwhile, Shivaji.
Yes, Bharataji. One
Namaste,
point.
Shivaji.
Namaste.
You have something to add right now.
Yeah, yeah. So, one thought that Purushottam being both the Akshara and the Kashra Brahman, right? The unmanifest and the manifest.
Shloka number 3, Hari Om. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Ye त्वक्षरमनिर्देश्यम् अव्यक्तं पर्युपासते सर्वत्र गमचिन्त्यं च कूटस्थमचलं ध्रुवम् ये त्वक्षरम् अनिर्देश्यम् अव्यक्तं पर्युपासते सर्वत्र गमचिन्त्यं च कूटस्थं achalam dhruvam. This is the shloka, very beautiful. Now again, Krishna didn't answer directly, right? Which is better, whether it is avyakta akshara upasana is better, or whether it is the Vaibhava Vishwarupa Upasana better, the Saguna Sakara form better. He didn't answer that, right? But now he's telling, Ye Tvaksharam Anirdeshyam Avyaktam Paryupasate Sarvatragama Chintyam Chakutasthamachalam Dhruvam. Some books, when we see the translations, this one and the next shloka are clubbed together. I think there is a lot of merit in studying them together. But nonetheless, we will see the Padacheda for this one. Ye tu aksharam becomes tvaksharam. Ye tu aksharam anirdeshyam avyaktam paryupasate. Saruvatragam achintyam cha kutastham achalam dhruvam. Right? We will see the Anvaya. I think Anvaya clearly provides the disclaimer, right? इस श्लोक का अन्वय अगले श्लोक में निहित है. Okay, the Anvaya reads like this. Ye tu achintyam sarvatragam anirdeshyam kotastham dhruvam achalam avyaktam aksharam cha paryupasate. Unka kya? We will see that later. Right? What does this mean? Yetu, the one, those who, this is the, we click on dictionary. Tu is but, like indeed, but. Tu, ye, those who, but. Ah, I think they are mixing up something from the next shloka to the current shloka. Hmm. Okay, there is something from the next shloka being brought in when we look into the dictionary. Sanniyamya indriya gramam. Okay, yetu achintyam sir. Okay, we will see the meanings directly. Will not go to the dictionary page. You can refer to the dictionary for individual word meanings. But let's see this. This is all easy Bharatiya words, right? These words are very common for every Bharatiya bhasha. Yetu, those who, but achintyam, the one that is achintya, unthinkable, na chintaniya, na chintya, achintyam sarvatragam, sarvatra gacchati, the one that is all pervading, enters everywhere. Like akasha, akasha is there inside the pot, outside the pot, inside the body, outside the body, everywhere. But come to the charvaka school of thought, they don't even believe in akasha as a tattva, right? They can negate it. So it's easy to negate it. Akasha doesn't exist. Only the sthula, ether, the Vayu is the one that is there. Because there is nothing beyond the Vayu. Right? That's what people believe. Right? But Akasha is beyond that. Right? We believe in that. Right? The believers believe in that. Right? Sarvatragam, the one that moves everywhere, the one that pervades everywhere. Sarvatragam. Anirdeshyam, na nirdesha. No, undescribable, something like that. Anirdeshyam. Kutastham. Kuta is the summit. Kuta is the group. Group, when you like, it's a summit, right? It's a like Trikutachala. When we see the mountain, Kuta, Kutastham. Kutastham is like at the top, right at the top. Like, for example, Akasha. Akasha is at the top. But Akasha, technically speaking, is at the bottom also. Is at the sides also. But when we want to refer to Akasha, we look up. Similarly, Urdhva Moolam, when we say Bhagavan is at the top, it's just a limitation in our mind. Bhagavan is there everywhere. Bhagavan is below the feet also. But he is above the head, is what we normally say. Right? So Kutastham, at the top, at the summit. And that summit can be below also because the direction is immaterial, right? Dhruvam, certain. Achalam, immovable. Na chalam, no movement. Achal. Avyaktam, so the one that is unmanifest, and aksharam. So this akshara avyakta is being explained. The one who paryupasate, the one who goes behind this avyakta akshara, I think these couple of shlokas are explaining a, don't just call avyakta akshara, let's see more about this avyakta akshara. Right? The avyakta akshara is not just avyakta akshara, it's not just unmanifest and akshara, immutable or indestructible. It is also achintya, it's unthinkable. That's why that 20th shloka of the 8th chapter, parastasmat tu bhavaha anyah, avyaktat avyaktah, avyakto vyaktat sanatanaha. The eternal one, avyakta, which is beyond this avyakta. The achintya, that's where we say that none of us are even eligible to do the chintana. We can do a little bit of chintana. We have some tools, right? Achintyam, sarvatragam, he is there everywhere, wherever our indriyas can go and beyond. Sarvatragam, that's a sarva. Sarvam samapnoshi tatosi sarvaha. Arjuna said, right, in the 11th chapter. Sarvam samapno, he is there everywhere. Sarvatragam. Anirdeshyam, indescribable. Na nirdeshana is basically direct, right? You can't describe it, you can't provide any direction towards it, nothing. Kutastham, right at the top. Top is there everywhere, right? Again, the kuta. And dhruvam, certainty, achalam, immovable. So he is the sarva vyapta nirlipta, no, chara chara, brahma karma samadhina. The brahma karma, which is the entropy of this universe, is samadhi sthiti for him. He is it's just constant sthiti, there is no change inside him. But we are in this chaos. The chaos theory is applicable only for us, but he is in the samadhi, brahma karma samadhina. So these are some of the expressions that we hear, seemingly oxymoronish, seemingly contradictory lines. No, he is achalam, but sarvatragam. He's there everywhere, but doesn't go anywhere. Right? There is a little bit of contradiction, right? So and that's why he's achintya. So that avyakta akshara, the details of that avyakta akshara, don't just call it as avyakta akshara. This is achintya. And that's why I think Atma at the lower level perhaps is not qualified there. Perhaps even Prakriti, the Mahat Tattva, is also not qualified here, because Mahat can be little bit thought about. Though Mahat, the Prakriti, the Parashakti is supreme, Avyakta, Kutastha, everything is true to her. This Avyakta is beyond all of that. It's Achintya, Sarvatragam, Anirdeshyam, Kutastham, Dhruvam, certainly. Achalam Avyaktam Aksharam cha Paryupasati. Those but who think about this Avyakta Akshara, who is Achintya, Sarvatraga, Anirdeshya, Kutastha, Dhruva, Achala, with these other attributes, then we will see what it means. Right? Let's quickly read Aurobindo interpretation. Those who seek after this Avyakta Akshara in indefinable, unmanifest, Avyakta Akshara who is indefinable, omnipresent, unthinkable, self-poised, immobile, constant. Dhruvam is constant, the certainty, constant. They also, okay, that comes later. They also come to me. I think there is a little bit of jumping of line happening in the interpretation. So let's quickly see the next one. Then maybe we will open up for discussions, right? The next one and this one are tightly, because some actions from the next shloka are brought into this one. So the next shloka, Sanniyamyendriya Gramam Sarvatra Samabuddhayaha Te Prapnuvanti Mameva Sarva Bhuta Hite Rataha. No, Sanniyamyendriya Gramam Sarvatra Samabuddhayaha Te Prapnuvanti Mameva Sarva Bhuta Hite Rataha. Padacheda for this, Sanniyamya Indriya Gramam Sarvatra Samabuddhayaha Te Prapnuvanti Mam Eva Sarvabhuta Hite Rataha. I think there is only one Sandhi. Sanniyamya Indriya, Sanniyamyendriya. There is one Adesha, Guna Adesha, Guna Sandhi. Right? We see the Avyaya, Anmaya for this. Te Sarvabhuta Hite Rataha Sanniyamya Indriya Gramam Sarvatra Samabuddhayaha Mam Eva Prapnuvanti. So I think the previous shloka describes the Avyakta Akshara in a little more detailed fashion. And this shloka elaborates on the Paryupasaka. You can't just do Paryupasana, right? There are some basic requisites needed, prerequisites needed to do Upasana. I can't say I am doing Upasana of the Avyakta Akshara. I need to have little bit of yogyata, right? Little bit of capacity. And that is being described. No, Sanniyamya Indriya Gramam, having samyak niyamya. It's not just niyamya, it's not just controlling. Samyak niyamya. There is absolutely na kinchidapi chintayet kind of a feeling he gave us in that Dhyana Yoga, right? In the 6th chapter. Sanniyamya Indriya Gramam. The complete pack of our Indriyas are under control, in full control. Sanniyamya. And Sarvatra Samabuddhayaha. There is absolute Samabuddhi. Like he spoke right about these things earlier, Vidya Vinaya Sampanne, Brahmane Gavihastini, Shunichaiva Shvapakecha, Pandita Samadarshinaha. That's a Samabuddhi. Samam Pashyan hi Sarvatra, all of that, Yomam Pashyati Sarvatra, Sarvam Chamayi Pashyati. There are many, many instances he explained all of this. No, Sarvatra Samabuddhayaha. They have that equal drishti, equal bhava in everything. Te prapnuvanti mameva. They also acquire me only. Sarva bhuta hite rataha. Those who are constantly desiring the hita, the well-being of all the bhuta rashi. Look at these two shlokas and the one that came in the end of the 11th chapter, because he's telling they also prapnuvanti mameva, they also acquire me only, which means who else will acquire him? The one who do the upasana of the Bhagavan in the Vaibhava Vishwarupa Darshana, in that kind of a state, right? Because they get him, karma, the last shloka of the 11th chapter, when he says mat karma krit mat paramo mad bhakta sanga varjita nirvairaha. That nirvaira swabhava is the same swabhava. The condition is to acquire Bhagavanta is being nirvairaha, which is sarva bhuta hite rataha, the one that he is mentioning here. No, mat karma krit, doing all of the things for my sake. No, uh, Nirvairah sarvabhuteshu yassa mameti pandava. They also get me. Mam eti. Now he says, te prapnuvanti mameva. They also get me. So irrespective whether you do the nirguna nirakara, avyakta akshara, paryupasana, or you do the vaibhava vishwarupa paryupasana, with proper sanniyamya indriya gramam, without controlling the indriyas, whether it is the direct perception of the knowledge, that will not be a true knowledge. That pratyaksha jnana also, for that also we need the indriya nigraha. That's what he says, no? In the jnana yoga, sarvani indriya karmani, prana karmani chapare, atma sanyama yoga agno, juhvati jnana deepite. Only way to kindle the fire of knowledge, the light of knowledge, is atma sanyama yoga. And then sarvani indriya karmani prana karmani cha atma sanyama yoga agno juhvati. You offer everything into the yajna of the atma sanyama, and without that our direct perception is also not true. We will be swayed into sense gratifications, right? Excessively consumed into that sense gratification. So indriya nigraha is needed even for the paroksha jnana, aparoksha jnana. For that also we need the indriya nigraha. Shraddhavan labhate jnanam tatparah sanyatendriya. Those things we already studied them, right? The fourth chapter earlier, jnana yoga only. Now he is reminding him again. No, to do the upasana, it's not easy to obtain that aparoksha jnana, maya veshamanaha. When you want to really develop that complete feeling of the Bhagavan, it's not easy. You have to have complete control over your senses, and sarvatra samabuddhi. You have to have that sthira buddhi, vitaraga bhaya krodha, without any attachment. Is this better, is that better, my karma marga is better, my kundalini system that this guruji has taught me is better than what you are telling me as the bhakti yoga. Do one thing, you will get the Bhagavan. You don't have to really keep mentioning about is this better, is that better. I can't say, sitting on the banks of the river, should I do breathing exercises first to learn swimming? Should I do flapping of my hands? Should I do flapping of my legs? Should I do maintaining the body dimension, in unison? What should I do to learn swimming? You have to first get into the water, right? Without getting into the water, no matter how much of intellectual jugglery we do, it remains intellectual jugglery. You get into the sadhana, and in that sadhana, whether you do the upasana of the Vaibhava Vishwarupa or the Nirguna Nirakara Avyakta Akshara, but when you do the Avyakta Akshara, please note, you have to know the Avyakta Akshara in its total form, which is Achintya, Anirdeshya, Achala, Dhruva. There are many things that was, Sarvatraga. There are many other things that you need to think about him constantly. At one time, you have to think about all these magnanimous attributes of the Bhagavan, and while doing that, you got to be sanniyamya indriya grama. Okay, you have to be sarvatra samabuddhi, and you have to be constantly sarva bhuta hita hiterataha. Like, you have to be constantly driven towards the hita, the well-being of all the living beings. Then you also acquire me. Again, the answer is not direct, right? Whether you do that or whether you do this, for me, that yogi is a supreme who shraddhaya, paraya shraddhaya upeta and nitya yukta and mai aveshamanaha. Those are the kind of yogis that are better. If you want to do the upasana of the avyakta akshara, look at that avyakta akshara in a little more well-rounded fashion, which is achintya, kutastha, sarvatraga, dhruva, anirdesha. Look at these other attributes and be within yourself that, indriya grama sanniyamya, sarvatra samabuddhi, and sarvabhuta hita. You also get me, they also get me. There is no issue. For me, that yogi is the best, who is constantly into me, whether in this fashion of whether is this end of the spectrum, which is the nirguna nirakara, or that end of the spectrum, the saguna sakara, whether this end of the spectrum, the prakriti, or that end of the spectrum, which is the purusha, whether this end of the spectrum, which is the parashakti, whether that end of the spectrum, which is the parashiva, whether this end of the spectrum, which is the avyakta akshara, or that end of the spectrum, which is the vaibhava vishwarupa. It doesn't make a difference. Offer yourself to me, you will be the supreme yogi. But if you do the upasana of the avyakta akshara, this is the total picture, and you will also get me, no doubt. Te Te eva, te api mam eva prapnuvanti. They also acquire me only. Okay, let's see the Aurobindo interpretation. But those who seek after the indefinable, unmanifest, immutable, omnipresent, unthinkable, self poised, immobile, constant Avyakta Akshara, they also restraining their senses completely by the equality of their understanding and by them seeing all the individual cells, all that individual cells in one being by their tranquil benignancy, with the tranquil swabhava, right? Atma Sanyama, of silence, silent will for the good of all existences. Sarva Bhuta Hiterataha. They also arrive unto me. Okay, that's a very beautiful transliteration. We have a couple of people who have come on stage. I'm not able to see who exactly, but if there are any questions, until this point in time, uh, please go ahead.
I'm not able to hear anything.
Oh, sorry, Mahodaya.
Okay. I thought I am not able to hear anything because it was.
Oh, no, no, no. I was speaking. Okay.
Okay.
Kleshaha adhikataraha tesham avya. Did you hear me
Yeah.
reading the
Yeah. Yeah.
shloka?
Yeah. 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 I heard everything, but now it was a silence. So I thought there must be a technical glitch.
My apologies. My
No,
apologies.
no
I think
problem. No problem. No problem.
Butterfingers. It just moved on the screen. My apologies. Kleshaha adhikataraha tesham avyakta asakta chetasam. This is the padacheda I'm reading. Avyakta hi gatihi dukkham becomes gatir dukkham. Dehavadbhihi avapyate, dehavadbhir avapyate. In both the instances, visarga is becoming visarga repa. So visarga adesha, right? Visarga is changing the sound from to Dehavadbhihi, Dehavadbhir avapyate, Dehavadbhir avapyate. So that's the padacheda. We now look into the prose ordering, proper prose ordering of these words in Anvaya. Tesham avyakta asakta chetasam kleshaha adhikataraha hi dehavadbhihi avyakta gatihi dukkham avapyate. Krishna is now cautioning Arjuna. Tesham avyakta chetasam, avyakta asakta chetasam. What does that mean? Tesham, in those avyakta asakta chetasam, in those uh, chetana yukta people who are avyakta asakta, who are interested in this avyakta upasana. The Avyakta Upasana is explained. The last couple of shlokas was all about Avyakta Upasana. So those who want to do the Avyakta Upasana, those who are keen on the Avyakta Upasana, Tesham Avyakta Asakta Chetasam, Kleshaha Adhikataraha. The Kleshas are too many. Adhikatara, Adhika is many,
I have a
too many.
doubt.
Can you please come
Bismillah
back after we
ar-Rahman
complete?
ar-Rahim.
Ramanji, sorry, sorry,
Allahu
sorry. I need to move to
Akbar.
the audience. Some discipline is needed. I mean, let's complete the, because see, there are people waiting. We have to respect the time. We have half an hour kept for clearing the doubts. Come back again. We will definitely have you up on the stage. If you, or you can't even wait. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. Some bit of doubts, some bit of discipline. We have a very, very civilized discussion. When somebody is talking, I think it wastes a lot of time. Some bit of social media etiquettes. I think people need to learn. Okay, in those avyakta asakta chetna yukta people, right, upasakas, kleshaha adhikataraha. The kleshas are too many. Kleshas are difficulties. Difficulty is one. Kleshaha, when we see the Patanjala Yoga Sutra explains kleshas as avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. There are 5 different types of kleshas. One is avidya, that's a difficulty. The deha vadbihi, right? Deha vadbihi is people who have the dehi, we are all deha. And the minute we have the deha, we have guna. All 3 gunas are constant. So the rajo, sattva, tamo, guna, all 3 gunas are constant. None of us are can be completely devoid of this. Right? Shinna, like Khinata is an aspiration. We will never be zero on these gunas and things like that. Traigunyo bhava, nistraigunyo bhava. It's not possible. It's an aspiration. So deha vadbhihi, for people who have this embodiment in the body, right? Kleshaha adhikataraha. Kleshas are too many. And the kleshas are this avidya. Avidya is that, and avidya is because the root of the avidya, again, when we go back to the Bhagavad-Gita, root of the avidya is that kama krodha. Jnana mavritya dehinam. So the kama krodha is the one that deludes the buddhi, manaha, indriya, right? And avidya is helpless. We have to resign to the fact that there is always a limit, little bit of avidya in all of us. Asmita, that mind, mamakara, asmita is always there. Like asmita is another klesha. Because see, at the very very simplistic level, it might not be durahankara. If somebody calls me Bharat, I will turn my head. That bit of asmita will have to remain, right? It will never be avoid of devoid of all of this. Even when we see people like Sadhguru coming on TV, I mean, we will have differing opinions from different people at what level he is in terms of realization. But the minute the interviewer calls him Sadhguru, he turns. So there is that asmita even for the learned gurus, right? That's why the school that I come from, the tradition that I come from, our Parama Puja Swamijis say that, have you seen the God? Are you self-realized soul? I'm trying a little bit. Okay, we will perhaps bring people on the stage in a couple of minutes. So kleshaha adhikataraha. Kleshas can be avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha. Raga, dvesha are basically attachment to something that is good, sukha ashayi, like people, the expressions, the things that gives us the sukhakara feeling, we have an attachment to them. And dukkha ashayi, like people, the things, experiences that gives us the dukkha, like gives us the aversion, is the dvesha. We have an aversion towards those. So this attachment and aversion are basically determined by whether it is sukhakara or the dukkakara, right? They both are the two sides of the same coin. Basically attachment and aversion, right? They are two sides of the same coin. And abhinivesha, the fear, and that's the animal instinct, right? Basically fear of this is where the 4 leaves of the Mooladhara chakra comes, right? The 4 leaves are basically talking about the Maithuna, the fear of, Vinasha. That is where we want to keep the progeny on. We have to extend our stay on the planet, right? So that's one Abhinivesha, Maithuna, Nidra. We think that we are too tired. Nidra, Bhojana, Ahara. That's another Abhinivesha. So the insecurity, basically the sense of insecurity, and ahimsa. We, like for example, the snake. Most often than not, the bite of the dog or the bite of the snake is all coming through insecurity. And even the people, even in our human world, attacks, the wars that we wage and things like that are basically extensions of that abhinivesha. So these 4 are constant. The 4 levels of insecurity can be termed as that abhinivesha, right? As a big package, we can call them as abhinivesha. So avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, these are excessive kleshas, right? Deha vadbihi. When you are an embodied person, when you are an embodied atma, you have these kleshas in plenty. And that's why avyakta gatihi dukkataram avapyati. It's extremely difficult to do the upasana of the avyakta akshara rupa without the proper murti. Murti, because then you have a way of. So it's basically the question of which is the easier way. The question now, I think, what Krishna is perhaps coming to is that there is an easier way. This is very similar to one point of in the second chapter when we go. So this is basically the bhakti summary of the second chapter, right? Because now from now on, I was telling, right, we see the summary of every chapter. So this is the second chapter because in the second chapter, he explains that avyakta akshara, right? Avinashitu tadvidhi yena sarvamidam tatam vinasham avyayasya nakaschit kartumarhasi. He is explaining the big thing in indescribable fashion. Avyakto yamachintyo yamavikaryo yamuchyate tasmadevam viditvaimam nanu shochitumarhasi. So he was explaining Bhagavan, the Parabrahma, in this big picture, the Gaunatmaka sense that we just heard about the Avyakta Akshara. And that Indriya Grama Sanniyamya, Sama Buddhi, right? The Sira Buddhi. When it comes to the Sira Buddhi Swarupa, he explains that, uh, he explains that, the one who can withdraw his senses, Kurmo Gani va Sarvashaha, Indriyani Indriyarthebhya, Yes Sarvatran. If somebody can withdraw all his senses just like or the Kurma, and then he also explains, and for him the Sira Buddhi can be established. He explains that in the second chapter. And then he goes on to say that, you can stay without, bodily experiences, Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya. Like, for example, when you can be a nirahari, you can be away from sense experiences. But if you really want to get rid of even the remotest of the thoughts, that can linger behind you, that's possible only param drishva, only when you realize the supreme. Param drishva nivartate. That can happen only when you realize the supreme, because he says, you know you know yatato hyapi kaunteya, even if you are an extremely hardworking yogi, yatato hyapi kaunteya purushasya vipaschitah, and even if you are the most intelligent of the beings and you are an extremely hardworking yogi, indriyani pramadhini, the indriyas are extremely turbulent and haranti prasabham manaha. They take away the manas, constantly sway the manas away. And that's what he's telling. Kleshaha adhikataraha tesham avyakta asakta chetasam. And that's why avyakta gatihi dukkham avapchate. And when we turn back to the second chapter, the answer to that is, tani sarvani sanyamya yukta asita matparaha. That's where the bhakti, the first instance of bhakti explanation in Bhagavad-Gita comes in that shloka in the second chapter. So while this chapter is called the Bhakti Yoga, it is basically the fruits of bhakti, the way we can understand. It's the drawing of the curtains to the second shatka called the Bhakti Shatka. This entire set of 6 chapters is about bhakti, but bhakti has been explained in the second chapter. Bhakti has been called for in the third chapter, in the fourth chapter, in the fifth chapter. So every chapter we have seen some bit of bhakti being called out. This shloka is a reminiscent of what we heard. Vishaya vinivartante niraharasya. You can temporarily do away with, Vishaya prayoga. But that rasavarjam rasaha api asya param drishtva nivartate. And if you want to really get rid of the remotest of the thoughts also, you have to realize the param, right? But the indriyas are so turbulent, even if for an extremely hardworking yogi or a very extremely intelligent person, for him also the indriyas are so weak, they will forcibly snatch the mind away, right? I think shloka number 59, 60, around the second chapter. When we see that, this is the summary that he puts in one shloka in the 12th chapter. He puts that summary here. Tesham avyakta asakta chetasam kleshaha adhikataraha. There are plenty of kleshas. Kleshas are avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. This is the definition we get in the Patanjala Yoga Sutra. So when we see that, and hence, as long as we are the embodied Dehi, Dehavadbihi, Avyakta Gatihi Dukkham Avapyate. The Avyakta Gati becomes extremely difficult. Right? We will stop here. We will pause here. At 9:30, we already extended by 10 more minutes. We will continue from now. We will start building up. I think, in a way, Bhagavan also explains in the path of bhakti all the 10, 11 chapters that we studied. right? Before this, we get to hear the summary of what exactly was being spoken of, chapter by chapter, right? That's another way of looking at it. We quickly see the recap of all the chapters of the Bhagavad Gita from the lens of bhakti in these next few shlokas, 5, 6 shlokas. With that, I will pause. I think I have spoken a lot. Let's quick request others to pitch in if there are any questions, if there are any further thoughts. The quick Aurobindo interpretation is the difficulty of those who devote themselves to the search of the unmanifest Brahman is greater. Kleshaha adhikataraha. Klesha is called as difficulty, but then little bigger meaning than that, right? It is a thing to which embodied souls can only arrive by constant mortification, a suffering of all the repressed members, a stern difficulty and anguish of the nature. Well, there is a possibility that this translation makes it seem appear, but Krishna's message is very, very clear. It's very, very difficult. Avyakta gatihi dukkham avapyati. Very great difficulty that you will be able to obtain that avyakta gati. Okay, with that we pause for the day. I think I have given enough in terms of the reset, what we do here. Please go through the club bio. I think perhaps a little more is there. And there is this YouTube link that Sudhaji has given. All the sessions that we have done, we have made it into a not a very well organized playlist, but basically these recordings with a little bit of editing have been loaded onto the YouTube. That might be of use, but it's lengthy, no doubt. And again, it's all Leshadaha. It's only a part of our Chintana, Artha Chintana. There is more we can all do. Hope to see you all more regularly in the forums that we run, both in terms of the daily Parayana, where we try to get ourselves better with the ability to recite the shlokas, and then that, when augmented with this little bit of Artha Chintana, should be a nice, equipment for us, for our own upasana of the Bhagavad Upasana, Bhagavad Gita Upasana. So with that, on the reverse count of three, let's conclude the room and meet again next week. And of course, tomorrow morning we will begin a new cycle of the Parayana. Tomorrow, Sunday, every Sunday we start our weekly Parayana with chapters 1 and 2. And Mondays we do chant chapters 3 and 4. So roughly about 100 shlokas divided by the chapters. And we complete all the 700 shlokas, 701 shlokas of Gita every week. So on the reverse count of three, let's conclude today. Shall we, Ramesh Mahodaya?
Yeah. I just wanted to say, I think it was a very beautiful